let's move on to Howland and talk about the Tigers and some of the things that they're going to try to capitalize on this year. I know one thing about Howland that I know for sure. They are a big team. And by big, I don't just mean the size of their players, but the size of their roster. I remember watching a couple of Howland broadcasts last year when they were playing YSN teams and going, they must have every boy that is in this school play football. I mean, it was like sideline, end zone to end zone, sideline stacks. So talk a little bit about what Howland's returning and what we can expect from the Tigers this year.
Well, like you said, Anthony, you expect a lot of depth from the Tigers this year, so they're always going to have 11 to field on offense and defense at any given time. You don't have to worry about that from the Tigers. But expecting from the Tigers, we look at the first-team offense that Howland had. Returning, they got Gage Gibson, an offensive lineman that is very talented for the Tigers. He's going to help out tremendously for that offense. They do lose Eric Babenchak, their running back. Helen, though, has had a unique ability of being able to breed running backs. It seems like every time they lose one, they're able to kind of mold the next one to take its spot. So they're really good for replacing running backs. I mean, it's not going to be an easy replacement. Babenchak was obviously very talented for Howland, but you gotta replace him somehow. And I think they have some guys lined up for that they're definitely excited for. Also, they have 3 departures too that were on second team offense, and Stone Walters, who was offensive line, Keegan Lanford, offensive line, and then Braden Gibson, who was the tight end. So offensively, you got one return on as far as the award honors, but there's a lot of returns overall as far as Howland, and there's a few guys that we're looking to make a big step up, I guess, is the right way to put it, on Howland. But offensively, the Howland Tigers are always pretty hard-nosed and tough up front, offensive line-wise.
And unlike the other teams we've talked about, Howland's a team that loves to run the ball, puts the ball down your throat, plays the old school, tough nose, because they use their sized, physical running team. They can do that because they can sub guys in and out because of their depth on the sidelines.
Absolutely. And I mean, like we said, you lose your running back, you lose your star running back, but Howland just has that knack of just being able to next man up mentality for that.
Right. And they have the line to kind of make any running back look pretty good.
Exactly. And I mean, they've had this unique ability. I mean, just the scheme wise of just always having a strong offensive line and always having great blocking up front for the runners. And I mean, able to get huge gains too from a lot of running backs over the years has Howland. Defensively, though, returning first team defensive Matt Woomer, defensive back, as well as Ethan Snyder, who was on second team, a linebacker for them. They lose Nick Majavec, the defensive lineman, but I mean, 2 returners on defense. Yeah. And Howland, that was their strong suit last year, it seemed like.
Ethan Snyder was the straight up playmaker. He seemed like he's one of those guys that maybe doesn't get talked about a lot, but it felt like when their defense needed a big play, oh, there's Ethan Snyder. No, shocker.
Yeah. I mean, and guy that's on second team last year, he's going for that first team honors in AAC this year. Stepping up, going to return this year. And I'm expecting a big season from him. And I'm expecting big things from this Howland defense this year.
You know what? Honestly, when that list came out, that was the one name I was like, man, I think he might deserve first team. Probably didn't get it because of Howland's record overall. And maybe they just kind of bumped, but I feel like especially if Howland gets a little bit more attention, a little bit more wins this year, then he will bump up to first team, no problem.
Absolutely. Big games that we have for Howland. September 3rd is going to be versus Poland. Poland comes to Howland to play the Tigers. That's going to be a great game. And I mean, you want to talk about big guys on teams, like just having size and then up front offensive and defensive lines. Oh, that's going to be brutal up front all night long.
Straight up, you bring yours, we'll bring mine. Bring your lunch pail, bring your hard hat, and we'll see who's tougher. I mean, that's just – we talked about Poland Canfield and their opposite styles. Well, Poland Howland, that's like strength versus strength. Straight up, we're big, you're big. We want to be physical. You want to be physical. Let's see who's the tougher guy.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's going to be one of those tough-nosed games. You might only see 10 throws all night, honestly, between these two teams. I mean, if the run game's working for both of them, you might just see them ground and pound the whole night, and it's going to be one in the trenches. That's one of those games that we know it's going to be whoever wins that line game.
I would also be shocked if it got out of the 20s and scored.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a low scoring, rough and tough game. You might see some turnovers. I mean, especially if it's raining.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started on that.
Those two
Um,
teams would be like, if you had to pick two teams to play each other that would make a perfect mud bowl, Howland and
that's it.
Poland would be up on that list.
I mean, you wouldn't see the numbers on the jerseys anymore because these two teams would absolutely be all over the field. Another big game, though, too. October 15th, they're going to be playing at home versus Canfield as the Cardinals come to play the Tigers. That's another huge game. It's a game, too, that Canfield, if they're taking this one lightly, Howland's going to upset them.
And it's part of Canfield's schedule where they're coming off a tough stretch. You got to think they're going to be a little bit beaten up, a little bit tired, a little bit, lagging a little bit. So maybe Howland's advantage to be at home in that game and bring Canfield on the road.
Yeah, and I mean, with the way that Howland plays too, it's a style that if they start winning that mental advantage early in the trenches, especially, Canfield can find themselves behind and they could start really struggling. And that's the one thing Canfield needs to come in ready for this game, as we expect Pavlansky to have his guys ready. But this is going to be a team that you don't want to underestimate in Howland.
I think, but it's going to be funny because if Howland takes a lead, Canfield's one of the teams, they can come back quick.
Yeah.
They can score very quick.
And a snap.
So the most important thing for Howland is don't get behind, because you do not want to be behind that team with the style of play that you play.
Don't be behind and maintain control of the ball. Have the time of control be in your favor heavily, as it should be. Because I mean, what you might see 5-minute drives from Howland resulting in a touchdown and a 45-second drive from Canfield tying the game right back up. Just the style they play. You're going to see Howland run the ball 10, 15 times. Canfield could throw the ball 4 times down the field and score a touchdown.
Yeah, the whole idea is just keep the ball out of Brock Lowry's hands as long as you possibly can. I mean, they would love a 10-minute drive. Forget 5-minute, just like 3 yards in a cloud of dust for Howland. I mean, they would love that, I'm sure, especially in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a fun game. That's going to be later in the season. Both these teams going to be a little beat up by that time. We're going to see who's tougher towards the end of the season, too.
It's going to start to get chilly, too.
Yeah, and those hits are going to feel a little bit harder, too, once you get hit in the October weather.
Don't want to talk about the chilliness. Let's go over the rest of Howland's schedule and try to gloss over that.
Yep, I'll pull up Howland's schedule real quick, and we will look right at that. So Howland, looking at Howland's schedule, August 19th, they're going to be at Niles to start. August 27th, at home versus Ravenna. September 3rd, we already said, versus Poland. September 10th is at Boardman. September 17th, home versus Toledo Waite. September 24th is at West Branch. October 1st versus East. October 8th at Cheney. 15th versus Canfield. And 22nd at Canton South. So,
a very interesting game in that, too, is the West Branch game.
That is a very interesting game. And that was one I was going to highlight on there as well.
West Branch kind of surprised a lot of people last year and were kind of always the us against the world because they felt like they weren't getting talked about enough. And to be honest, they weren't talked about enough. And now they're coming, like, people are talking about them now because you did it.
Oh, yeah.
You went and did the thing.
You can't leave them out of discussion going forward at all. Yeah, and that's going to be a great game too at West Branch. Still end of September weather, so you hope as long as rain stays away, it's going to be a good weather game too. Perfect for football. And I mean, if it's not raining, you might see some throws on both ends then. But I mean, it's going to be a fun game too.
West Branch likes to throw. That they like to sling it.
Exactly, and I mean, you want to talk about styles. I mean, that's a different style. If it's not raining, it's going to be a fun game. If it's raining, you might see it cater more towards Howland in favor of them. But late September, you never know with weather-wise.
Yeah, when you look at how much weather is going to be a factor in all these games, that's the thing that makes football fun. I mean, rain, they're playing. As long as it's not a lightning storm, we're going. I mean, we saw monsoons in week 1 last week. Last year, I should say, not last week. I wish we were playing for a week already. But remember last year, week 1, there were some games that got delayed because of lightning, but there were also some games that didn't have any lightning but got like monsoon rainstorms, and they still played. I mean, they're playing in the pouring rain no matter what it is. I mean, they'll play in snow if it gets there. I hope it doesn't get there. But the football is like, hey, let's go. No matter what's happening.
Absolutely. And the other interesting thing too about the Howland schedule, only playing 2 teams interconference wise. That's September 10th at Boardman, and then as well as that October 15th versus Campfield. So both Fitch and Warren Harding left off the schedule this year for Howland. So only 2 conference games for the Tigers this
Yeah, I
year.
feel like in football, the AAC is more of a loose,
Yeah.
we'll play
Yeah,
each
they don't
other.
try to play. I mean, they try, but I mean, you try to get a couple games in from them. But yeah, so both those teams left off of the schedule this year, but I mean, still made up with some interesting games that'll be on there too. That Ravenna game is going to be interesting. Ravenna coming in to play Howland, so that'll be an interesting game between 2 teams. Yeah,
You live right there.
my
Ravenna's
backyard
right there.
so I know a little bit about Ravenna and the Ravens, so that should be another fun game too. Out of YSN school and the Ravens coming in to play a YSN school in the Tigers, but still, nonetheless, should be a fun game to watch.
Howland, we're happy to talk about Howland and talk about the rest of the AAC as we grind on